we've had a chance to get to know each other a little bit, and we're going to move right into our conversation today. So if you'll allow me to share screen, I need to put my kids away. Hold on. There we go. Let me share this screen instead. There it is. Okay. So I just wanted to focus our attention just on some things you may not know about the Alliance. And, you know, we call this the welcoming table. The table has been such a beautiful metaphor for the Christian Alliance. Number one, the leadership tables that women have not been invited to. So we are the welcoming table for not just women, but for male allies who also know that change is going to help our sector. But then we've taken that metaphor a bit further to look at the Alliance, me and my team and the 12 women that created this and the 12 women that now are part of the advisory board and men. We bring some parts, we bring some dishes to put on the buffet table, but it really is going to be dependent on members stepping in and finding ways to serve, leading workshops, leading a peer group, for 2 or 3 weeks, doing a video on, hey, what is it like to be a woman who serves in WASH, a woman who serves in an engineering ministry. So sort of, a day in the life of my work, especially for our younger members who are joining, and they don't really know what different careers look like across the sector. So that's a great way, do a 10-minute orientation video on Zoom and share it with us so that we can be sharing it across the platform. So, but the other piece of the table are the 4 pillars, the 4 legs, if you will. Our table stands for bringing women together in community, but also for the purpose of critical mass, to join our voices, to collect organizational data for the purpose of advocacy in the sector. And I'll talk more, obviously that's today's topic. But also recognizing that as we start moving leadership seats available, as we start trying to work to change organizational cultures to be more welcoming places for women and women of color, there's a lot of healing that needs to happen. I mean, we heard it in some of our conversations just earlier today. The damage that is done is real when you've been constantly told, because you're female, you're not enough. Because you're female, you need to act more like a man, et cetera. There's messaging. So spiritual restoration is a huge part of what we offer. And then lastly, leadership equipping. And this is what I've been known for in the sector for 20 some years because of my role at Eastern University, focusing on leadership development across the space. And many wonderful, godly men and women I've had the opportunity to meet, but I see all these phenomenal women and I see how few of them are making it to areas of influence. So I'm not even going to just focus on C-suite seats. But so when those seats start opening up, when the cultures start changing, are we making sure that we are equipped to be a new kind of leader in the space? And so equipping is one of the 4th component. I actually believe they actually work together as a system. So we know that when organizations only do 1 or 2 little things to try and move the needle, it fails. And everybody feels discouraged because there was such high hopes that we were going to become a different kind of organization, And so just recruiting without addressing the culture. You see women walk in the door, 12 months later, they walk back out, So, but we're not going to move the needle unless we join our voices together for advocacy purposes. We know this. I've been in this sector 25 years. I've seen so many false starts, and it's not for ill intention. It's all well-meaning, well-intentioned, but we all tend to operate in a disaster mindset. We're going to do this, thing to change our culture, to make it more welcoming for people of color, for women, and then the next disaster hits and it gets backburnered. The next financial crisis hits and it gets backburnered. So unless we unite our voices and say, this needs to become an executive level strategy, and not an HR department nice to have. Unless we join our voices and say that, we're not going to move the needle. It's going to continue to be this front burner, back burner, front burner, back burner issue. So our conversation today is, what is the Alliance intending to do to help move that needle? Our vision is to become a space that unites voices of members, gathers your story, and collects organizational and individual data for the purpose of advocating for better experience serving in the global development sector. And so identifying those great places to work and learning about the issues that we need to advocate for in the places where they are not great places to work. So what if we start collecting benchmark data on a year-over-year basis that you help get the information, and in 2025 we launch the prizes, the top 5 faith-based NGOs for women to work in, and the top 5 small faith-based NGOs for women to work in, because we know there's resource disparity between the big guys and the little guys. When we start celebrating that out in a social sphere, when we start celebrating that and communicating that regularly to future donors, whether it's the person that swipes their credit card every month to sponsor a child, or the grant maker at a major foundation who decides who that grant's going to go to, when we start celebrating that, that will move the needle. We know this. But what we're lacking is a critical mass of people coming together to be able to provide that data. And I'll talk about one of our strategies coming up on how to get that by institutional members. So that's what we're looking at as far as our vision for advocacy. And in my opinion, in my humble opinion, it is the most important role that the Alliance can play, because there are other places where you can go and connect and find community with women. There are other places where you can go for leadership development and spiritual restoration. We know that. But bringing it all together is what actually, helps and addresses that systemic nature of this problem and helps to address it. So what we have preliminarily started with, because we know from research on what moves the needle, is leadership representation that has more women at the board, executive team, and senior level roles has been proven to change the organizational culture for the better, for everyone, okay? And that means more diversity. Women hire more diverse candidates. People like women supervisory styles, excuse me. And so we want to, and in organizations for whom 40% of the people they serve are women and girls. 70% of the people they serve are women and girls. 70% of the workforce, the employees, are women. Why would we not want more women around our executive table? So one of the advocacy issues is to start to expect and report on where our organizations are in their percentage of women on the board, women on the exec team, and women in senior level leaders. Second one, transparency around any theological position on women in leadership or other invisible barriers for women's advancement. There are some organizations that, because of their theological position, they will not elevate women above a certain level. So we call it, I think somebody called it the stained glass, the stained glass ceiling for women. But they're not transparent about it in hiring. So I have, a couple thousand alumni in the development sector. And I've heard over the years regularly, I took the job there not knowing that everything they say about themselves on their website and, isn't true. And so you get in there and you find that you're going to be limited in how far you can go in your career. So we just want transparency. We don't need to change anybody's theology. I don't have time for that. But we want transparency. Be honest with it. That's your space. Then, man up and own it. The third one, leadership development investment. We know also from corporate research, most leadership development dollars, especially the big ticket items where you're sending somebody to a Harvard something or other, tend to go to the people who are already at the top 10% of the org chart. Why are we continuing to bake those that are fully baked? Why aren't we investing more in the mid-level of the organization to get them moving up into more senior level leadership? So, and it also tends to go towards men, pretty dramatically, statistically speaking. So where are we putting our leadership development dollars? Are we making sure that we're investing in women equally to men, and particularly first-tier women into their first and early rung leadership roles? Because that's also proven that when you have a very healthy pipeline of women coming up, you will have greater ability to be hiring and promoting more women into leadership because you've prepared them. So that's our third area. Fourth area, this may be new to some of you. We've seen a shift in the last 10 years in the corporate sector, wanting to do away with, they're called non-disclosure agreements. We've coined them silencing settlements. And what it means is when you become a person who either because of your age, because you've been determined that you're a bit too outspoken, maybe a little rabble rouser, not for performance issues, I'm talking specifically other reasons, an organization may decide to exit you. And there's a couple ways they do that. Number one is marginalizing you and then not treating you very well. And so hoping that will just make your life work life so miserable you'll go on your own and go quietly. And then the other is asking you to go, but requiring you to sign these agreements that say you won't share the circumstances of your departure or anything like that. There's something, well, from a legal standpoint, you can understand it perhaps, but in this Christian world, there's something very icky and wrong and unbiblical about this concept. So there's my high level word for you today. It's icky. To tell somebody you cannot share your story, you cannot, you have to hide that part of yourself. What have you got to hide? If you're an organization that is regularly having people signing non-disclosure agreements, silencing settlements, paying people off to go quietly, there's something seriously wrong with your culture. Address that. Redirect your funds to fixing that so that you have fewer and fewer of these incidences arise. I want to see our cultures reflect the shalom of the kingdom of God, because that's the message we've been carrying to all the countries of the world where we work. So are we living that message out inside our organization? And if not, why not? And then the last one is a new one. But one of the harsh realities for being able to hire women, promote women, keep women, is the reality that we need workplaces that welcome women and welcome women's bodies. Again, shameless book plug, my co-author Ava writes a whole section on this about how our NGO workplaces were never designed to welcome women's bodies. And so we talk about it in creating cultures of belonging. There are solutions to this, and we're going to be bringing some of those to you in the future to help organizations replicate what some agencies are doing and finding successful. But things like shared roles, 2 20-hour work weeks, 25, 30-hour work weeks for women, especially in the years that they have children. Jobs where they can take the role and travel less during a season, again, for child rearing years, accommodating women if they do need to travel with children. Places for breastfeeding in your office, which is becoming less and less of an issue as we move more and more away towards remote work. And we're going to talk some more about some of these policies that I want to hear from our participants today. So you say, oh, that's all well and good. And we've tried to have these conversations with our NGOs. Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. In 25 years, I've been part of more conversations on this kind of stuff than I know what to do with. So I'm a bit done with the idea of going hat in hand and asking every organization, please change, please change, please change, please prioritize this. We're deciding to go where the people who have influence can help us and join us in the cause. So one of our major target audiences for our advocacy campaigns is donors, both individual donors swiping their credit card, and that's through social media, but also foundation leaders. We had the blessing of having some amazing women foundation CEOs come to the Alliance conference last year and have been continuing to think together about what does it look like and what could their role be. But picture it, if every Christian foundation added 5 simple questions to their grant application. How many women on your board? How many women on your executive team? How much of your leadership development dollars goes towards women versus men? How much of your leadership development dollars goes towards investing in first-tier women? And how many silencing settlements have you had women sign in the past 12 months? 5 simple questions for all of us to be asking on our grant applications before we swipe a credit card to donate to our favorite NGO this month, or before we put in an application to bring our best talent to a workplace that isn't going to embrace it. 5 simple questions could dramatically change the sector within a minimal amount of time. And so that's one of the things that we are advocating towards. Future talent pool, again, investigate, choosing where you bring your talent. The board of directors issue. It's fascinating to me if you look at a lot of the board of directors on our NGOs, there are lots of folks that come from the corporate world, and women do fare better in secular corporate space. I think the rough now is about, I want to say 28 to 35% women in senior executive spots, depending on which group you measure it against. So Fortune 500 versus Fortune 1000 companies, et cetera. And Raquel, I'm going to ask you, yeah, I will make sure those questions are written. Yeah, so boards of directors need to be just exposed to the data, exposed to the realities. I know folks who've been through CEO searches, women, and when they get to the final conversation with the board, they were told, we picked the person who had already had CEO experience. You know what the harsh reality is? If that's your delimiter and that's who you're going after, then you've eliminated like 99% of women in our sector, because there's only a handful of current women CEOs in our sector, and they've got their gig. They're not planning on jumping ship anytime soon. So your pool for hiring women into the CEO spot, if you want somebody who's been a CEO of an NGO in the past, is really tiny. They don't even know that. And that's been, you know, the expressed communication back. They had no idea that our sector only has less than 20% women in senior leadership roles, and yet 70% of the workforce, okay? And then the last one is our dear brothers and sisters who do sit in senior executive roles and CEO roles across the NGO sector. I love these people. I have loved these people for 25 years. Some of them are my students, former students. But this topic of diversity in our organizations has regularly been considered an HR department nice to have, when in fact we know from corporate research it needs to be put on the strategic necessity list. You will respond better to the next disaster if you have greater diversity around your team. You will have better fundraising outcomes if you have greater diversity of women on your leadership team. All of your organizational outcomes, housing, WASH, microfinance, I could keep going. All of your outcomes and performance will be better and improve better if you have more women in your senior leadership roles. Full stop. We know it from research. We know it from reality, you know. World Vision, who I adore because of the long-term partnership I once had with them when I was at Eastern, they have invested heavily in women leaders going back to the 90s. And to this day, when you look across the organizational chart, women on the board, women on their executive team, women country directors, et cetera, et cetera. Are they perfect? No, no organization is perfect. None of us are going to be perfect until we pass into the gates of glory. But they have been way ahead of the curve and doing some really progressive stuff. And I hold them up and I thank them for being a model for the rest of us to follow. So, so we're going to talk about some of the ways organizational leaders, we have created a tiered sponsorship role, because some organizations have reached out to me and said, how can our organization as a whole get involved in the alliance? And we haven't traditionally had that for a couple of reasons. One, not wanting to be beholden to any organization that says, wow, I really don't like your social media posting this month. You're hitting a little too close to the bone, you know. So we really don't want anything that hinders our messaging and our advocacy passion to be squelched by organizations that say, well, then I don't want to give money to you, you know. And that's fine. We don't need money. I serve a God who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. I'm not worried about any individual organization's money. But we do want organizations to step forward to be able to say publicly, and we will help them celebrate and say that publicly. We are a place that welcomes women. We want you to apply here. We want you to intern here. We want you to be part of our talent, because we want to be one of these high-performing organizations in the future. So let me tell you a little bit about, oh, okay. Yeah, I'm going to stop right there. And we'll talk in a second. So that's where we are. We have created on the website a transparency pledge that we want organizations to sign off on and also contribute towards the alliance. And there's 2 different categories of contributions. And then we will celebrate that on our site. But we also want them, in addition to signing off on the transparency pledge, we will be giving them a 15-question benchmark data survey, so that we can start collecting the year over year, how many women on your board, how many women on your executive team. We have no intention of shaming anybody in this process. We will celebrate the ones that are doing a number of things really well, because we can learn from them. But we also recognize it's going to be a continuum. Everybody's on a journey, you know, and so we're going to see some that are saying, we want this, we just haven't been able to prioritize it. We want it, we don't know how to get started, and we're here to help. And then every space in between. Well, we have that process, but we haven't started that process yet. Hey, that's a good idea. Thanks for that. You know, so everybody's going to be on a continuum of where they are in the journey. So that's where we are as an alliance. I want you to get excited, because we are finding more and more receptivity from foundations to this message, from our brothers and sisters in leadership spaces across the NGO sector. The Alliance has been invited back this year to do a workshop at Accord, and it's going to be all about the Alliance. And I've been invited to co-lead a new community of practice on leadership development for Accord. And that allows us to regularly also be sharing what are the best practices in ensuring that 50% of your leadership development participants are women. And here are the kinds of things you need to be doing to prepare women for leadership. So it allows us to have a voice into what I think is a critical function of leadership development for the space. So anyway, thoughts on any of those things? What else came to mind as you were listening to the presentation?
One of the things I was thinking of is the power of the board. So I am the chair of board development, and which also functions as the nominating committee.
Yeah.
And the challenge is finding younger women, especially under 30 or just around 30, who have the time in their lives to commit to the work required to be a board member. And that's what we're coming up against We also have a board with only 5 members at large, so only 5 members that the board itself can strategically name to positions. The others are denominational representatives, and we often get people who aren't the profile that we would have hoped for.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if people have ideas for recruiting board members that don't turn into an old boys network, and how to make the job description of a board member accessible to women. So not just staff women, but board women, how to make this work with the travel requirements and time requirements.
Yeah, yeah, great. Any of the others of you on serving on boards that have managed to address some of this?
I guess I can speak. I'm Raquel Hutchins, and I'm not in a board, but I did help out in a nonprofit, and I was part of like their committees. And I'm in my 30s, so that you said that you wanted to recruit people around my age so they have the time. So at that time, I was working full time for the financial industry, and what helped me be part of those committees that reported direct to the board was having a work that would allow me the time to be part of those committees. So I went to those meetings as part of my extracurricular activities that work would support. So having a place that supports you being part of the committee, that's huge. And the way that I found out about those committees, it was through friends that were already part of the young professionals, and they were the ones that connected me to that. So that is more from the secular perspective, but if there is an organization that has a focus in young professionals or young people in the industry, then from there, having word of mouth, I think that's how I was able to get connected. And from my perspective now, I'm a stay-at-home mom, and I would love to be part of boards and have that time where I'm like, okay, well, I can spare some time. So getting the word out and finding those people, I think there's people that's willing, especially if I don't know, if you have like the time, or you can find arranged hours to spend your time. I think there's willing young adults that would like to do that. So that's my experience.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. You'd be a good board member, Raquel. You're so wise. And I failed to introduce you or have you introduce yourself on the call, because you and I are on these all the time, so I keep assuming everybody knows us. So Raquel Hutchinson, and she works for the Alliance, 5 hours a week right now, until we are growing ourselves again. And she just had her second baby. So, and she does come from the financial world, and she loves technology, which means I love her even more. But Jeannie, one of the questions that came to mind was, do they need to be Mennonite? Is it denomination specific to be on the board? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So that, yeah. Yeah, that definitely changes your pool. I'm thinking META, looking for people who I've had some alumni go and who are probably in their 30s go and work at META.
Yeah, so this is staff do not need to be Anabaptist, and it's like 8 denominations.
Yeah.
But it's the board where it's our challenge, and especially as we're looking to people of color, that is another priority for us on the board. And just being strategic, thinking that if people start in their 30s and stay on the board for their full terms, they're going to be in their 40s by the time they leave, and we need to always and consistently be saying those at-large board members need to be very young if we hope that they will stay.
Mm, mm, yeah. Yeah, denominational recruiting is always a challenge. I mean, you can put it out on things like the Christian Alliance, because we do have a good, and I said Mennonite, you mentioned Anabaptist. Can it, the board members have to specifically be Mennonite, or can they just be from any of the Anabaptist denominations?
We have 8 different Anabaptist related supporting
Oh, okay.
denominations. So it's broader, but still not as broad as the
Yeah, yeah,
possibilities. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that, and then targeting schools, targeting universities that match Mennonite, what's the one that we love that used to do the peace building, summer peace building, still does? Eastern Mennonites, duh. In fact, Lindy Backus is there. I don't know if you ever knew Lindy from our Eastern days, but recruiting from people who are in their master's programs, who are probably working professionals, who may also be coming from, Anabaptist tradition.
Yeah. And I think what you said, Raquel, about looking to people who work in professional roles that want their staff to be able to do community service work, that's really a helpful idea, because I think the bottom line always is time and travel time and being away from family.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that we're encouraging both organizations and boards to think about is what of those things really truly are essential. I served on a board, and because it was, they were willing to contribute towards some travel, but they didn't necessarily cover expenses all the time. So it just became too costly for me to be traveling for it. So we did everything on Zoom, and that allowed us to then have board members from anywhere. And so now there was always the once a year, retreat type experience, and they did try to, help board members who couldn't afford that to come. So be thinking about ways that, for people that you're resourcing, and if somebody wants to come with their child, is there, an ability to do that? World Vision was always brilliant. They ran a leadership development program where half were women, half were men. They have about 600 people through the program, and pulling people away for their 2-week residencies. But they allowed people to bring children and help find a local caretaker that could sit in the room with your baby next door, to your classroom. And just be there. And then if there's any problems, you pop in, and I just thought that was, and again, this is going back to late 90s, early 2000s, trying to just really accommodate to make sure that, these spaces work for women, so that, and the level of loyalty that invoked in their employees when they said, I've been so invested in and made space and welcomed, I'm not leaving this organization. I'm gonna pour in here because of how they poured into me. So other thoughts that came to mind as we were looking at the different advocacy areas, other things that you see in your own organization, you think, that would be something that would be helpful. Looking at your comments. Yeah, totally agree. I can put those questions out. We need to start probably promoting them more, even on social media, Raquel. People around me get so tired of hearing me because I'm quite passionate about those things. Only because I've seen so many things that we do that isn't changing the needle. It's not moving the needle. And it breeds cynicism. So here's one. After Me Too, and there was like a resurgence again after, George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, you saw a lot of our faith-based NGOs, they either didn't post any public statement. I was quite proud that Tear Fund USA posted a beautiful one and a genuine one. But a lot of organizations rush to appoint and celebrate publicly the appointment of a diversity, equity, inclusion officer. And then, you know, as I start to talk to more and more of these folks who do that role, they're saying, yeah, that was the big splash. But since that time, I've been demoted, or the position was created with no financial resources, no authority to hold people accountable to, you know, becoming more diverse in this division, you know. So it was more somebody who was a subject matter expert who could make suggestions, but there was no grit to the role. And so different, you know, executives could choose to follow it or not, you know. So that was the one. The other one is, you know, bias training. Well, we've implemented bias training across the sector or across our organization. And without some other things in place, bias training can actually wind up causing more backlash and more harm. And so, again, why we need to approach this from a systems perspective. You know, HR helping to identify what are our policies that have got bias written into them. What are our processes and procedures that are automatically eliminating, you know, one group over another? If we're doing a great job at vetting resumes, but we're still not getting hiring, what are we doing in our hiring panels? Are they diverse? Do we have a clear metric? Are people getting an extra point or points for being the diverse candidate? If we know that that is a strategic help for the organization, why isn't that held up as important as this person's 10 years of experience or this person's Harvard degree, you know? So it's sort of rethinking and reframing why isn't the diverse candidate the one that moves to the top of the pile if we know that that's going to have such positive impact in our workplace. So yeah.
I'll jump in with one more thing. You had talked about moving things over to strategic initiatives, not just nice to haves. Yeah. And I think it could be really helpful from the Alliance to have a suggestion of things that should appear in a nonprofit's strategic plan. Are you speaking to this as a goal? Because many times that's just in the background and it needs to be strategic and written and part of the plan. And that's sort of something that could be a helpful template as groups are working on strategic planning. The other one that I think of in terms of advocacy is whether a nonprofit's track record with inclusion of women could be one of the categories. I don't think it is. I didn't have time to check, but like on Charity Navigator, as you're looking at where are good places to give, is that one of the considerations that they're looking at? And is there a possibility for change in those tools as well?
Yeah. So when we started this, we started brainstorming and conceiving and praying about the Alliance 2 years ago this summer, okay? We didn't do a public launch until a year ago, this August, the next month. So we're a year old. But 2 years ago, we were asking that very same question. What if Charity Navigator? So they've always been on my radar. It's just finding somebody to connect to there that, you know, has, but since then, they have started looking at diversity. And I think they're starting to include a diversity metric in their assessment. They've taken a long time to do it because you have to do it well. And so, especially when you're an external org trying to vet some of this stuff. And so they announced it like 3 or 4 years ago. But I think they finally have come up with a way to include a diversity metric in their rating system. And again, some of these things are going to be game changers. It's interesting, though, because some of our NGOs in the sector are registered as churches. And so they don't necessarily have to be evaluated by Charity Navigator. And so they avoid, that external critique. It begs the question, why then aren't you more transparent on your own on some of these things? And so that's why, the Alliance, we want to create the transparency pledge, but also celebrate the organizations that have signed on to it, and celebrate the organizations that have given their base, their benchmark data that we're talking about, so that you can go to the website and look and see if the logo of this organization that I'm thinking about applying to, or I'm thinking about giving to, shows up on the Alliance page. That's an organization that says we want to be a place that welcomes women, and knowing that doing that's going to make a better workplace for everybody. And that's really what we want. I'm not trying to lead some militant, no men allowed kind of movement, because that's not godly. It's not the kingdom. And there's so many of our good brothers who want this too. They just don't have any tools or mechanism or a vehicle like the Alliance to help move it in that, move their organization in that direction. Jonathan Wiles at Living Water International has been our huge ally and walking with us every step of the way. Mile Green at World Relief is, my hero. And World Relief has done some of these things that we've been talking about today. You mentioned the strategic plan. I'm going to ask them if they could share a sample. I do think they made it part of their strategic plan, and every division has to put forward and report on it. And they have amazing diversity in their board, their executive team, and throughout their organization. I can let Courtney and Clement speak more to that, because they're both from World Relief. Are they perfect? No. But they're on a journey. They're on a journey. And it's all because Mile made a public commitment. We are doing this. We are gonna, and it's bearing fruit. So we need more CEOs to step up and say, we're going to move in this direction. Now, you might be asking, why don't they? So a couple of reasons that I've noticed over the years. One foundation lead, when I had asked if they would, consider supporting the Alliance, the response was, I have board members who are male conservatives and don't believe that women should, be leading NGOs. So they were afraid of offending board members. I've had people say, I'm afraid of offending my conservative donor base. And many of our Christian NGOs in the US are supported by conservative, often male, foundation leads and donors. And so they too are not, it's not a priority for them, and so, but they're afraid of losing money. Their current workforce, now 70% of your workforce are women, but much of your senior leadership ranks are men. And are you suddenly going to get a lot of pushback if you communicate to the organization, we need to become more diverse. We want to become a place that welcomes women and women of color in equal measure to the balance of our workforce. So in leadership roles, so what do you say to your male counterparts? There will be pushback. Let's just be honest about that. One organization I know that made an announcement that they were going to start looking into this and how ways to address to get more women in senior leadership roles. They made the announcement one day, and the next day on that thing called Glassdoor was a posting. And because it's Glassdoor, it's public access. So I use it as an example in the book. some angry person wrote this: white males need not apply here. If you're a white male, don't bother coming here. You're not wanted. And if you're a white male that already works here, don't expect a promotion anytime soon. Apparently, it's our fault that the organization has maintained a masculine norm in leadership positions in the past. So the rest of us have to pay the price to show how diverse we are. The organization's gone too far and will not promote or hire any more white males into leadership positions. It's outright discrimination to appease the women who have been crying foul. Not saying that they're wrong, but discriminating against white males to make a woman happy is wrong. I love this person. I don't know who he is. I prayed for him because I thought, oh, poor guy. So many fallacies with that argument. But that was the knee-jerk reaction. I also happen to know in that organization, since that whole event happened, they've hired and promoted many, many, many more white men. So now, was it because they got scared, and they, maintained status quo? I also know a lot of women who work there who in the door and 12 months later, 18 months later, out the door. So they've got work to do on their culture. And I know they're on a journey for that. And, we want to be praying and encouraging that. But so if you're a person in power of position, if you're a woman CEO worried about losing your donor base, worried about offending your male employees, there will be pushback. Any kind of proposed change that we make in our organizations will have pushback. If you are truly a leader, you understand this and you have the backbone to navigate that. No, we're not talking about an all-female workforce, but we're talking about a place that represents more of the workforce as it is in the leadership and decision-making roles. We're talking about making a place that accommodates the fact that women right now, biologically, are the only ones that can have children. So how are we making their work roles able to accommodate having a baby without having to give up your role, your tenure, your being backburnered for opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, the question is, who is centered in your decision making? Absolutely. Yeah. Other thoughts or questions or ideas? These have been good, and I'm adding them to our list. We'll also be sharing this conversation publicly on our socials, so we can get other input. But all right, I am going to give you your marching orders as I promised. So you sit here and think, this is all good, this is fine, nice to listen to, she's telling us the problems we already know about. I want you to know that I spend my days and way too many nights thinking about you and thinking about this issue and how do we advocate for better realities in our organizations for women, because I know it will also improve our realities for women and men. So one of them, we need critical mass. Right now, we've got about 1,200 people that follow us on LinkedIn. We've got about 600 people who've signed up to be part of the Alliance and the Alliance platform. So I want you to share the Alliance with everybody in your organization. Talk to your HR department, talk to your CEO. Would they be willing to just put out a simple paragraph encouraging every employee, not just women? We encourage our male allies too, and there are many of them. I've gotten to work with some of the most amazing men in my career who absolutely support this. And they just need a place to say, hey, I can come and stand with these women, because I want a better workplace too. So sharing this and pushing for people to join. The nice thing is when they go through the membership page, there's no fees, but they also get to share with us, hey, Jeannie Yancey recruited me. Courtney Purvis recruited me. So we're going to give you good shout outs when I suddenly see that you've recruited 100 people today. So through all of your email lists, etc., women and men. The second one is being an advocate within your organization. So we will be launching in August the tiered sponsorship campaign, inviting organizational CEOs to join on the transparency pledge and the benchmark data. Sorry, I jumped down to encourage. The transparency pledge and the benchmark data, and becoming a sponsor of the Alliance so that we can share with the world, with donors, with future talent pool. These are the organizations that are committed to being on the journey, not perfect, but somewhere on the journey towards becoming a better culture and a better workplace for women and for women and men. Okay, advocate within your organizations. This big thing, we need to be better at collecting data from our employee base. So being an advocate within your organization, if you'd be willing to be an advocate where we can just put you on an email list, when we have and launch the future surveys that are coming, there'll be one in August, there'll be one in October. They're going to be shorter. They're going to be 10, 15 question surveys on targeted specific areas of things we talked about today, to help us collect more information and feedback so that we can use that for advocacy purposes. These organizations don't want to hear the one-off incident. It doesn't matter to them because they're dealing with, thousands of employees. But when they find that 50% of their workforce doesn't feel engaged at work, when they find that 50% of the women that work in their place have experienced some form of microaggressions, when they hear that, they want to change, but they need the data, and that's where we can come in and we will come in, okay? And then last one, I've given you a lovely little QR code, and I want you to all shout out and celebrate, look, Beth made a QR code, because everybody thinks I am technologically inept, but consider financial support. So the Alliance is supported by members, foundation grants. We have just, exciting news, rolled out and created our own 501c3, which has been part of our strategy all along. So we are our own nonprofit organization now, and welcome you if you find participating in peer groups and the leadership development opportunities that are provided, and specifically having this group to be your ally and your advocate in the space. If that is important to you, consider making a donation to it so that we can keep this work going. Because I feel the momentum. I feel the momentum in the conversations I'm having. Way exciting stuff for the future. And so if you want to be part of that in an easy way, where I'm not asking you to give, lots and lots of your time, which is so precious, consider supporting us. So that is what we are doing. That is where we are going. I'm excited. And I would love to hear from each and every one of you on this call today, watching this video later, on areas that you think, we would really love to see advocacy in these spaces. We've talked everything from pay transparency. So, we know what kinds of pay ranges, all different kinds of topics. But I'd love to hear from you on the areas that you feel would really help move the needle for the sector and for your organization if we had better transparency, data, and an advocacy voice that the Alliance plays. So any other comments from our group before we drop off today?
I had put 2 questions in the chat. Okay. Yeah, one was like, do Alliance just focus on people who work with faith-based organization, or maybe also other women or allies who can join from different organizations? The second was when we encourage people to join, what level of leadership should they be in, like middle management or just maybe senior managers of within the organization?
The Alliance is welcome to every layer of the organization. So if you are just joining in a data entry job, you are welcome here. Now, your question about types of organizations. We have a lot of Christian women who work in global development, but in secular organizations. Save the Children, CARE. They are absolutely more than welcome here. I have one in a coaching group because she misses being part of Christian conversation and the spiritual nature of our discussions as women, you know, in God's kingdom, but also the role that, you know, our faith plays in ending poverty, you know. So they are absolutely welcome. Women who work in any sector who would love to be part of these conversations, but our topics and our focus is on faith-based global development sector when it comes to advocacy, because we have to be focused. I can't, you know, take this and become an advocate in Christian universities, or, you know, it's just too much. When you try to be all things to all people, you become nothing to no one. And so our advocacy work focuses on faith-based NGOs globally. And so that could be ones based, you know, in other spaces. And then membership is open to everybody. Your 3 questions to decide if you want to become a member. Do you love Jesus? Do you want to see a better world for women and girls? And do you want to see poverty ended in all its forms? Those are the 3 questions to determine whether this is a place that you want to come and be part of. I am not becoming a gatekeeper for any other identifier because I don't have the time for that. And we have decided as a board, as an advocacy, as a alliance steering committee, that was going to be, this is a welcoming table for anybody who wants to join us in these conversations, learn more about global development. I've got women coming from corporate sectors like, you know, I really want to learn about development. And we've got some Development 101 materials out there and some other stuff in our learning center that they find really interesting. Church members, the same way. You know, we want to learn how to be better at doing global development. We've got materials out in the learning center on the platform. So in order to access that, you do have to become a member. Okay, well, I'm just going to wrap us up and thank you all for your participation, for all the good questions and comments in the chat. And you have a fabulous Thursday. Never, ever, ever forget or let anybody tell you otherwise that you are God's beloved. He calls you beloved, created in his image, called for his purposes, and that's a really good thing. So have a great day, everybody.